Hello, I'm Rebecca Bradley. This is the Virtual Crime Book Club. It is Monday, the 10th of February, 2025. Today we are discussing The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill. Spoilers will be discussed, and it is a very spoilery book. So if you are watching this on catch up, then be aware that we are going to discuss everything. And I don't think this book can be discussed without disclosing things anyway. Um, so thank you everybody for coming back. After we took a couple of months break over Christmas and the New Year. So, The Woman in the Library, did you enjoy the book?
Yes.
We've got some yeses and some a little bits. We'll go with the yeses first. Oh, that's new, Vera. We actually got a thumbs up sign in your window. Did you do that, or did it just come up because you did that?
Yeah, no, I didn't do anything. I don't know.
It, I just downloaded a new version. It must be something new. So who wants to say why they enjoyed The Woman in the Library, or what about the book they enjoyed?
I've enjoyed the book. I read the book a while ago, so now I just had a quick look to see what I could remember. But I remember that I enjoyed it. But obviously, it's this type of book where you need to go with the flow because there are lots of turns and some things that are not very believable. But at the same time, it was fun. It's a fun read, and I like the way she wrote it, like with the letters from this strange guy to the writer, and then the book itself was really a book, not a real life story. So yeah, I like it, but it's this type of book that okay, you just go with the flow and you have a bit of fun.
So it was more of an easy read.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I think the main reason I liked it, it's not 100% positive, but is because it kept me guessing. First of all, I thought the murderer was one person and another person. Usually I'm quite, good at getting them immediately. I kept changing my mind. I never thought it was Kane, but, there were a couple of other people. So, yeah, that's the main reason I enjoyed it. And it was interesting that it was a kind of book in a book. Some of those letters worked, but a bit far fetched. I think that's where you have to kind of, as Vera says, go with the flow.
Yeah. So somebody that didn't think it was a great book, what about this book didn't you enjoy?
Hi everyone.
Samuel.
Personally, I thought it's because the story that the writer was writing, the one about anyway, it wasn't profound enough. There wasn't enough in-depth study of the characters. At some point you see that how she's trying to crowbar some details to get the story get going faster. I think towards the end, I felt.
Anybody else? So you didn't think that the characters were that well drawn?
Yes, I found it really strange that that boy was the one behind everything. Not the story with the guy who was not the story that the oh gosh, sorry, can't speak tonight.
The story from the library.
Yeah, yeah, that one I thought wasn't great. It was fun, but it wasn't. I was expecting a bit more than that, I suppose. Yeah.
Personally, it just didn't grab me. The main story, I just kept losing concentration when I was reading it. But I did actually really enjoy the letters from Leo. It was almost like they were written by a different author. So I guess that was clever writing from the author themselves, and I really enjoyed like the sign-offs at each of the letters. And I found in the end that I was kind of flicking through the main part of the book and really not focusing on it, and then concentrated whenever the letters from Leo came up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it was a book within a book. Did you find that confusing, or did it work for you?
I thought it was quite confusing at the start. Once you got into it, you were enjoying it more, but it was a wee bit confusing to start with. But I really enjoyed both aspects of the book, the Leo part and the woman in the library. I thought their characters were really easy to get to like, particularly the girl with the tattoo. I thought she was great fun.
Yes, what was
It was a little bit tricky to have like a book in a book, and with the letters there were so many layers, but I actually thought it was really unique and ended up really enjoying it with the subplots. And it was a bit hard to keep remembering that, oh, this is a book, because when I'd read the book in the book or the library parts, I would think that's the book and forget that the book was about someone writing it.
Yes, and I think because the book that was inside the book about the library, was told in first person, so it gives you the sense that it is the author that is talking to Leo that is narrating her own experience. And I think that kind of weaves it into a bit of
ambiguity.
It makes it a little bit, I think
complex.
It brings you into the book more, but it can make you forget about which life is real. Maybe that is done on purpose.
Maybe it's just me, but I just found it deeply confusing, especially the first 100 pages or so. It's like 3 different books in one. You know, the author Hannah Tigani, as far as I can tell, she doesn't exist in the book yet. She's meant to be the author of the Freddy book, and keeping that separate from Leo. I just found Leo at first irritating and then psychopathic. So he's an irritating psychopath, and I just found him quite intrusive. I was quite happy reading the Freddy library story, and yet the blurb on the back has got nothing in it about that. The blurb on the back is about the relationship between Leo and Hannah Tagani. Hannah doesn't really exist in the book at all, though. I just find it very difficult. Again, perhaps my age. I just find it very difficult to keep all these things separate in my mind and work out what the hell was going. There's 5 novelists in this book. That's 5 too many, as far as I'm concerned. And there's about 3 or 4 books being written. Leo, the irritating neighbor down the hall, is writing a book. Ken's writing a book. Freddie's writing a book. Hannah Tagani's writing a book. That's the book we're reading, I think. And Leo's writing a book as well. I mean, I just found it mind-bogglingly confusing. I quite enjoyed the Freddie narrative, but I couldn't be doing with the intrusion of the Leo, the irritating psychopath, and his letter. But yeah. Oh, and actually, I thought the best character by far, I think, is Mrs. Weinbaum, when she stitches Kane up, and then her lawyers turn up the next. I wanted more of that. I was very happy with that, and yet she just completely disappeared after that. That was a shame. But the library narrative, I was quite happy with that.
Yeah, I love your description of Leo, the irritating psychopath. I love that.
What's worse than being a psychopath? It's being an irritating psychopath.
Irritating psychopath.
Well, I have to say, I also found it very confusing, but more than that, I didn't relate to the characters. They didn't feel real to me. The characters didn't feel real to me, and that was my huge problem with it.
That's what I felt a bit about it, but mostly the ones in the library.
What about them made them less real, do you think? Was it the fact that they were they always seemed to have a lot of time on their hands? It wasn't nobody had a job, did they, apart from the writers? Or I don't know, what was it that didn't connect?
It wasn't in depth enough, because when I'm reading a book, I like to be able to visualize the character. And there was nothing there. I couldn't visualize the character. There wasn't enough depth in the characters for me.
I felt that all we saw of them is the first image we had of them in the library, and that's it. There wasn't anything more, despite them interacting with each other. It was just that facade all the time.
Yeah. Did anybody like the characters?
I did. I thought they were very approachable.
Yeah.
I mean, there were lots of stalking in it, wasn't it? I mean, somebody said they liked the girl with the tattoos, but I mean, I would find her extremely irritating.
Yes, that was a bit of an over the top obsession with wit. Yes, and she clearly owned up to it all as she was doing it. So
but also keep bringing Hannah, Freddie up, and calling round as well.
But also, I've just realised, while Hannah was writing the book that we were reading about the characters in the library, her character, Freddie, was writing a book about the people she had met. So did people follow that part of it?
It just felt so meta.
You really had to kind of think about what you were reading. At the very start, after the scream, Freddie said straight off the bat that she was, what did she say?
She's having coffee with the murderer.
That she now had a friendship with a killer.
Oh, yes.
So very early on,
she was
told us that one of those people were the killer. Did anybody have any early ideas about who it might be?
No.
I thought it was Marigold. Couldn't have been Kane, because everyone, including the police, suspected him. No offense, Rebecca. And couldn't have been. I did wonder if it was Freddie, the author
herself. Yeah. I thought,
but yeah, I thought it was Marigold, especially when she wanted to borrow Freddie's dress. I thought, yeah, she's going to try and impersonate her or something. But no, it was Wit. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. As well as, what did you call the psychopath? Irritating psychopath.
Irritating.
We had a Leo within the story.
Yeah, that was weird as well, I thought.
What did people make of him?
Yeah, that was confusing. That was really
weird.
Confusing.
Yeah.
I spent a while thinking, well, maybe this book wasn't actually written by Hannah Tigani at all, but was written by the Australian police in an attempt to entrap Leo, the irritating psychopath. I found it quite confusing, really.
Yes, we'll come back to that. Did anybody have any thoughts on the Leo that Freddie was friends with?
I thought he could have been the murderer at one point, because he's stalking as well. And then, at the end, he turns up in the lift at the hospital, and you think, was he in cahoots with Wit? And is there going to be a sequel? I think he was very dubious. But the other one, I think that's where you have to suspend belief, because if I remember right, he end up in Australia, but it was supposed to be lockdown and COVID.
No, he couldn't have been there
to get there.
How did he do it? Yeah.
So what did you make of the book? We're now in 2025, and the majority of lockdown was 2020 and part of 2021. And I think the book came out in around that time. What was it like reading about the pandemic now? We're a couple of years through the difficult part of it.
Feels like it was a very long time ago to me.
Kind of hard to believe it actually happened.
Yeah, and the fact
do you think, did we really do that? Did we have to live like that? I'd forgotten about it.
And Leo insisting on that it has to be mentioned in the book is, I mean, I don't know what effect it would have to us now if it was mentioned in that book. I mean, he mentioned it, but yeah, as I said, it didn't seem to have any effect on me.
One thing that came to my mind as I was reading was about the actual author, so not Hannah, but Sulari Gentill, and the way that there were topics brought up in the discussion between Hannah and Irritating Psychopath. Did you notice those, aside like bringing up the pandemic and whether it should be brought up in fiction? And they also brought up the issue of whether race should be noted in fiction, and because of where people lived, etc. So you had this very self-contained story of Freddie, Kane, Wit, and Marigold. And then you had kind of, was Solari asking questions, do you think, through Hannah and Irritating Psychopath? Sorry, Clark, I just love that name now.
I think she was. How we tell stories, and how when we read a book, we assume straight away, because of the place where it's taking place, white people, or presumably all white. And the fact that she asked the question, I think she's probably trying to make us think about it.
Yeah, because Sulari is a person of colour, and I think as a white reader, I'm guilty of just putting my own face to characters unless they have, I'm told differently. So I think everybody does that. We all have our own inner world, don't we?
Well,
so it was interesting to see the discussions outside of the book. Did that change anything for you?
She says at the end, Sulari, that she got inspired by the letters that she exchanged with one of her fellow writers, because she was writing a book that was set in the US, and this guy was doing research for her, like Leo was doing. And at one point, he discovered this crime scene, so he sent her some pictures of ambulances and things. And her husband commented like, "Oh, I hope this guy did not kill someone just to send you the pictures." So that's why she got this idea of the Leo character and the exchanges. So probably these letters are actually inspired by the letters that she exchanged with her fellow writers. So, because sometimes she's wondering, or Leo is giving her advice on how to do something in terms of writing. So that was probably inspired by.
Yeah, but why does it need to be in the book? Why do these two narratives need to? Yeah, there was interesting stuff in it, very interesting stuff in it. But why do these need to be kind of shoehorned into the one book? I kept trying to work out, well, where's the crossover between these two? So
I think
it never happened.
It's a way of making the book a bit different from all the rest, right?
It's a unique way of telling a story.
Because we have so many books now, so many, and sometimes you need something to make them a little bit different. So this was a way to make it a bit different, to have the psychopath.
Yeah, I thought it was very unique. But Rebecca, to mention about COVID, at the end of my book, there was like an author Q&A section. I don't know.
See, I had the audiobook, so I don't get any of that.
So one of the questions was talking about the virus and the choice of including it. And she kind of talked about how it's one of those things where there's a temptation that once you include it, it's just going to take over the narrative. But at the same time, setting it in a place where you're ignoring it is like ignoring a part of history. And so going through this dilemma, Leo demands its inclusion, and Hannah refuses to let it into her story, but through them, I allowed it into mine. And I thought that was quite interesting about how she handled that tension, and she really did not let it take over the story without compromising or acknowledging the fact that it existed. And I watch a lot of TV shows, and the newer seasons always have like a whole part of the pandemic. And I will say that it does not derail, but it does overshadow everything else that's going on during those episodes. So I think she did a good job with that balance.
Yes, I agree. It was, things were acknowledged and the story was continued. I love this book. And I think it's because of the unique way that it was set up and done, because it was something so different to what we normally read. And I absolutely loved it.
You know, you were talking about the race issue. In the reading group guide, which is at the end of the book, if you've got the book, it does ask the question about the race thing. And he says, in his emails, Leo insists that Hannah specifies the races of her characters, pointing out that it could drastically change their experiences and perspectives in a story set in America. What does a story gain by making race explicit, and what might some consider to be the potential drawbacks? So I think somebody has studied the text and seen all those different points, that she's probably raising.
I think the race point is in some ways more interested than COVID, and she obviously made the decision not to, describe what race or what people look like in any detail. But then, it did make me think about the way I assume, the way certain characters are. So, it was interesting. I'm not sure that it needed to be in the book, but I was quite interested about what she was saying.
It had quite an impact on me, actually, and I'm pretty much the same as Lynn just said. And the two or three books I've read since, I've found myself paying more attention to the characters and me actually thinking, rather than just making assumptions and just having character actually trying to work out more about them. So I found it a really interesting point. It really stuck with more than anything else in the book, I think.
Well, I've also read some books since, and actually checked on how the characters were described by the author. And some authors actually decide not to say anything about the race, but only on the environment of that person. For example, I've seen a book by, I think it must be the Marlowe Club by Robert Thorbred. And there's a detective in there, and never said anything about her origin, but she's obviously for some Indian origin. But it's a clever description of her by saying she's inviting someone to tea, and she said, well, if you can stand my father talking about India and how great India was during the colony, whatever, that's when you learn that she is. But there are the little things that tell you, but without having to say she is of Indian origin, she's a colored person or something like that, which I find quite clever.
Yeah, I think I prefer that kind of introduction rather than just describing what a person looks like, because you don't describe. Actually, she did quite a good job of describing all the characters, particularly in Marigold, the tattoos, and I love that. But yes, Muriel, I think that is a great way of just the story being told without having to stop and make a specific point about anything.
Yeah, because I've been reading some French books, detective stories, and absolutely hate most of them. I mean, I only read English. I'm French, that's why I'm reading French, but I really love reading in English because it's a lot more subtle, the way people are portrayed. The French ones is just straight, he's black, he's so you've got this, you're trying not to have a stereotype idea of the character, but that's what comes from the description. You can't help it.
Yeah, it is. It's a big it's a big discussion, and that I think the world at large is still having, unfortunately.
I had never really thought about the race of characters. I think like you actually, I just assumed all the characters were white. And so when in the letters the irritating psychopath Leo brought it up, I was like, oh right. And I mean him questioning how the race of the characters would change the readers. I mean, the reader of Freddie's books, perception of the characters was very interesting. And again, like I felt was a clever way to weave in a very complex concept.
Yes.
And like in that way, I actually really liked how she then went out of her way to not reveal the race of the characters, much to his agony. Like you like because he was kind of like a person of this race cannot be living in this neighborhood or something like that, kind of like even showing more of his stereotype that forced you to reckon with it. So I liked that subtle input.
Yeah, it was a great way to introduce the topic for her. With regards to the Leo that she was conversing with, does anybody else have anything they want to say about the external issues before I move on that Sulari introduced through Hannah and irritating? Irritating.
I actually like the way suddenly there was this letter she wrote to, or the answer she got from is it Interpol or was it something like that?
Yes,
or the FBI, I can't remember. I like that. I mean, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I like the fact that it was only Leo's letters and what she received from other people, but never her letters that we saw.
Yeah. Did anybody figure out there was anything wrong with Leo before the FBI letters were introduced?
When he said something about his graphic description of the photos he was sending or the details, I thought that was very, very creepy.
Yeah, the letters became more worrying, didn't they, the more he wrote them. So I did guess some time before the Interpol that there was, well, not that he was immediately a serial killer, but yeah, but
he was weird.
Definitely
people kept dying around him, so something was going on.
I felt like after the FBI letter, things got pretty seriously downhill in terms of the creepiness.
Yes,
and
let it rip. But I thought she did it very well because I could actually imagine Leo, although I was reading only his letters. And so I enjoyed that Hannah was never a character.
Yeah.
So I think that was well done.
How did you think the books married up? Because we are talking about two books. We've got the story of Freddie, Kane, and the other two, which is quite a cozy read. But then you've got irritating psychopath Leo, who is introducing a more graphic kind of crime into this cozy book that we're reading, because he's quite descriptive about some of the injuries to these victims in the photos that he's sending. Do you think that those two, the cozy and the more graphic crime, kind of blended well, or was it too much of a contrast for what a reader might want out of a book?
I thought the author was trying to show the disgust of Hannah for Leo when she changed. I mean, at one point she was humoring him because I think the FBI asked him to keep writing to him. So she added some details in the book she was writing in the library that Leo would have liked. But at the same time, she couldn't help not liking what he was writing. So she didn't include most of it in her book. And in a way, I feel that the library book was finished off quickly so that she could get rid of him. It was only to please the FBI that she did the rest. I find that's probably why it wasn't as finished, and why the characters didn't have as much depth as I expected. She wanted to get rid of him, and only did it because she didn't want to do anything with the book anymore because of Leo. I don't know.
So, talking of the characters and then the ending being wrapped up, did anybody identify that it was, what was his name? Whit, before he was revealed?
No.
I mean, I guessed that it was him at one point, but so I kept changing my mind between a few. I kept changing my mind between him, Marigold, and the other Leo. But I can't remember what towards the end, I realised it was more likely him than the other two.
I did think it was going to be the Leo that she was writing about. Were you surprised by the reveal of it being Whit?
And I was more surprised by myself being influenced by irritating psychopath Leo's constant guesses of who the killer was. Like at the first mention of the next door neighbor Leo, he was like, "Oh, this is brilliant! Like you've introduced another character to me." And I'm like, "Oh yes, yes." So I was like following along with his analysis,
yes.
And he never really got to Whit, so I didn't either.
No, he came over as a very nice guy, I think, Whit. And it didn't help that he was also stabbed. Do we think that there was enough conclusion around his mum's behaviour by saying that it was Cain who had assaulted her?
I forgot who actually assaulted her.
Yes,
we don't know.
It could have been a complete lie, and she wasn't assaulted at all. And I mean, you do think, how did he manage to get in a lawyer's office? But then the Freddie character asks that same question, and I mean, it wasn't a very satisfactory answer. So, but you did wonder about the mother's motive. Did she suspect her son was the killer? Had they done something else in the past that's,
So it wasn't just me. I hadn't missed anything. It wasn't, that section wasn't wrapped up properly.
No, it wasn't at all.
Okay.
I thought the actual explanation for Whit wasn't that clear either, because after all, he's meant to have, the lady who died in the library, well, according to Whit, that was an accident. And then the vagrant was self-defense, according to Whit. And then suddenly he's kind of assassinating 3 people because the 3 others that he met in the library, he suddenly turned into some sort of assassin in order to cover up his tracks. I mean, I did think that was a little strange that Whit had gone from inadvertent killer to assassin, very quickly.
But don't you think that
I wasn't sure how he killed
excuses?
the woman in the library, because he said it was an accident, but I realised I wasn't sure how he killed her. I mean, did he push her over and she hit her head? I'm not sure. He didn't stab her or anything, did he? So how did he kill her?
Hit her head on a library book.
Don't know. I think I missed. It feels like I didn't tune in properly to the ending.
It was confusing. That's why. I think you were probably listening, but you got confused by so many strange details. And that's why I'm saying that it's like the Hannah character was trying to finish the book, whatever, because she wanted to get rid of it. And that's why it's so messy. She just didn't think it out properly.
I don't remember lots of the details, but Whit was clearly a psychopath. And I don't think the first killing was an accident. He was trying to justify this to himself. So, and also with the homeless guy. So he was already covering his tracks, because I think the homeless guy saw something, right? That's why he killed him. So it was a psychopath, and he was just justifying his act himself. So it was like, oh, this was an accident. I'm not a killer. This was self-defense. I'm not a killer. But he was obviously a killer. But okay, I don't remember lots of things. So I read this
a while ago.
years ago.
Yeah. And talking of killers, the perception of everybody about Cain, do you think that is a genuine reaction? Do you think society doesn't forgive or accept people who have committed these crimes, done their time, and come back into society? Do you think that is a genuine way that it would have gone?
Well, I find personally the penal system is very badly flawed, whichever country it is, that we shouldn't just lock people up because that's not going to make them any better once they come out. And there's something that where they are being followed and helped towards understanding what they've done. And so that, if we had a system where we actually show that they have changed rather than just say they're out again, they have gone through lots of, I don't know, psychological help and all sorts of things. I mean, there's so many of them, I don't know. It's a lot of money to do these things. But I don't think society is ready to forgive these people. No, and I think it's true.
Especially because they did very bad things, even if they regret it, even if they are better now, they still committed lots of crimes. So
yeah, they did.
Yeah, it's difficult.
And that's why I think if there was a system where it's acceptable to society to see what they do, what they've been doing while they were inside, which is showing that they are showing a remorse and then they can be changed, then society would trust them a bit more, is what I mean. And then maybe they'd be more ready to accept and forgive. But it's not happening at all.
No.
I think it depends on the crimes, right? There are some crimes that cannot be forgiven, I guess.
Well, yeah. I mean,
even if they regret, even if they become like the greatest persons, and
no, but even if it's fraud, it's a crime. It's a bad crime. It's I don't know. It's equal to murder to me. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Was everybody satisfied with the way that the story was wrapped up?
No, I wanted to hear something from Hannah. I wanted Hannah to have some sort of involvement in the book. I mean, she was behind it all with the discussions with Leo, and then suddenly she's gone.
Yeah.
And
I
so
was a little bit confused with the first person narrative of Freddie, whether that was Hannah's actual life. So I was a little confused there because it was kind of a story within a story within a story.
I think Margot wanted to say something.
I just thought it very interesting that Hannah does disappear. We don't know what happens to her, and Leo shows up all of a sudden at the end.
Yes, what did we make of that? It was like that ominous note right at the end before the screen goes black.
Yeah, I thought it was quite creepy, personally, when he suddenly appears.
Do we think that was because of his character or because of his name being the same as the irritating psychopath?
His character.
I
think it was his character. Yeah.
He's a suspicious character.
Because he did send the anonymous gifts to her, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought that was weird and never actually fully addressed.
Yes.
It wasn't just the cupcakes. It was also that like chocolate and I don't know what it was.
The hamper
basket
one, yeah.
Yes, it was very strange. So did you enjoy the fact that it left you with a oh moment, or do you like it completely wrapped up?
I would have liked it wrapped up properly. I thought it was just stopped a bit abruptly. I think that's an easy way out of not finishing your novel.
I thought it was on purpose that she left it like that, because Hannah would have left the book and really with a bad ending because she just wanted to get rid of Leo. That was my way of thinking of it.
It was definitely an interesting read with all the layers within it. Would you read another by Sulari?
Actually, I've read a few of her other series, historical series featuring Roland Sinclair. They're very different to this. It'd be interesting if you tried another one of those and decided what you thought of that as opposed to this.
This must be a very unique one in the West compared to what she's done.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be difficult to do it again and not feel repetitive. So yeah, is anybody going to search out any of her books?
Maybe.
Not much
But yeah, normally I would read another book of the author if I'm like, oh, I really like this type of book. But this was so unique that I don't expect it to be repeated, like you said. And I mean, it's kind of a one-off that I don't know if I'd like other books to be repeated in this way. It was like a one-time great, like what I wonder. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting in the author's notes at the back where she was asked about how this is a one-off novel versus the series that she wrote. And she was asked whether it's very different writing a one-off versus series. And she said it's kind of like writing the first book of a series where everything is fresh, but you do need to wrap it up because there's not going to be a sequel. So to me, that made it quite clear that, oh, okay, so when she was writing it, she was very intentional that I'm not going to write a sequel to this.
Yeah, I did look, and no, there hasn't been anything. So yeah. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss about The Woman in the Library?
I like the descriptions of Boston as well, because I've been to Boston many years ago, so I kept Googling the places that were mentioned to see the actual photos. So, yeah.
One thing that ran through my mind, because I do write, I found it interesting when the irritating psychopath was talking about how you plot a book. How is that as a reader? Did you find that interesting, or was it more about his manner in the way he was saying this stuff?
No, I thought it was interesting, especially when he said something like there was a character and he said this character can't be the murderer because they were introduced so late, like that's not fair game and stuff. I thought, oh, that was cool, yeah.
Yeah. Because I like those little things, but I know not everybody would have.
And on a mundane level, I like the explanation and what the different language meant. You know, one thing is meant in Australian, but it's different in America. I quite like that as well.
Yes, I liked when he told what the American would be.
But they wouldn't use that word here, they'd use something else instead.
Yeah, I did.
I suppose the discussion between how he would write a novel and how she was writing it, I thought that was interesting actually, because your authors have different ways of starting a book. Not many people have very laid out plans. So it's nice to see that she had. Is she the one who was talking about having a bus, going on a bus? Yes. And then things just happen, which I like that. That's the way I would relate to if I had to write a book.
But we don't know if that's Hannah's way of writing or just Freddie's way of writing.
Freddie's way of writing, yes.
Maybe Hannah's way is more like non-irritating psychopath, or more like Kane's way of like putting up notes. That would be quite funny. Then she wrote about a writer who doesn't write that way.
Yes. Yeah. One thing's just popped into my head before we finish is the agent that real life irritating Leo Gates said he gave his manuscript to ended up dead. Do we think that he killed her for rejecting him?
Yes. I was
Now that you
suspicious of
say
him
so,
at
yes.
that point. Yeah.
I never thought about it, but yeah, quite
No.
possibly.
I
forgot
thought,
about that,
I thought
but
so.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
he definitely did.
She
Yeah.
did that.
Here, you killed everyone. That was
Yeah.
like he was taking pictures of all these dead people. He was
Mm.
just killing these people just to have something to tell
To
Hannah.
send, yeah, to
Yes.
send to Hannah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I was
And
talking about the end
and
of
we
the book.
wonder why Hannah disappears all of a sudden.
Yes, I know.
She was probably hidden by the FBI or something, so that she wouldn't be found by.
Yes, yes. Divya, you were going to say something.
Yes. I was gonna say, at the end we get to see Kane's or Abel Manners' mother and uncle. I thought that was quite a random introduction right at the end.
Yes.
I thought that maybe that the mother would say something more helpful about, what happened before, or the uncle as well, to give some light on whether this really was an accident, because we learned so much earlier about how it seemed very unclear the mother's role in the crime that was committed,
Stepfather.
or
Yeah.
was she a victim, and so I felt like at the hospital they were introduced, but then they didn't say anything about it. So I was like, okay.
Yes, there seemed to be a couple of things that weren't wrapped up. But was everybody satisfied that the book had finished and it had come to an end?
Yeah.
I was satisfied with the ending. I think I was more confused by their sudden appearance. So I wasn't like fully wondering about, oh, what happened to his mom, until his mom really appeared. And then I was like, okay, wait,
Yes.
so what is the purpose of this character then? I think there was like something, I think it was Clark mentioned something about something appearing, and then you're like, wait, what is the purpose of it? So I was left wondering about that, and the uncle as well. Like,
Yeah, because they didn't have to show up, did they?
yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
I feel like there was some plans. She had the bigger thing to write, but she just finished the book because she didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
Yeah, because of the psychopath.
Yes.
But didn't she end the book while irritating psychopath Leo was in prison? Because irritating psychopath Leo said he had to get the book while he was in prison, and by then it was written, and I mean by then he was calling it our book, but yeah.
And very annoyed she'd not implemented his comments. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a mixed bag from The Woman in the Library. It was a very different book to read, so it doesn't surprise me that we've got such varied thoughts and comments on it. So I really enjoyed reading it and discussing it because it was so different. Before I stop the recording, does anybody want to say anything else about it?
I would say you should read it and make up your mind.
Yeah, definitely. Let me just stop the recording. If I know how now. Everything's moved. Meeting. Stop recording.